Hey guys, it's Thomas here, and it's been about a year since we started the mega build, so I thought, year in review, thoughts on how it went and what I would have done differently and how things are going. Here we go. First off, how are things going with the tank? Things are actually going really well. The tank's pretty low maintenance, lower than I actually expected it to be. I've only done in a year 4 water changes, which I don't know if that's something I want to admit or not. But it's the truth. I've only done 4. My nitrates have never been above 40 ppm, which is great. It's pretty much what we're all aiming for as aquarists, as little maintenance as possible without having poor water quality. I have had almost no algae this entire time. I've had a few little bouts of green algae that popped up here and there, which is kind of when I knew it was time to start looking at those water changes. But that 25% water change, which basically is done all from the tank to a sink using a Python. It's really simple. Completely gets rid of those issues, and my fish have been happy and healthy, which is all I can really ask for. My favorite fish in the tank is still the Viejas Innispilum. He's grown quite a bit. He's got a lot of color. He's got still a lot of growing to do, but he's really enjoyable, and he is kind of the enforcer of the aquarium as I expected him to be. Swims around, basically claims the whole tank as his own, but the other fish are basically allowed to roam around him freely. The barbs are also really great. The filament barbs have gotten really flamboyant, especially as of late. Every once in a while they go through their little breeding cycle and go through their courting and different sparring rituals that they do when they're getting ready to breed. So the males beat on each other a little bit. It never gets super violent or anything. But during that time, they have the most color they ever get, and they just look absolutely amazing. So they're really cool. And my newest additions are some Cyno catfish. I've got 2 of the, what I believe are Angelicus. And then I've also got your typical featherfin Cyno. They're great, super peaceful catfish. They're out and about quite a bit, even though they're sometimes a more shy species. These guys seem to be out and about a lot, especially during feeding. They'll be flying around the bottom of the tank. Super pretty, kind of shark-like, and they add a dimension to the tank that wasn't there before because they are always on the bottom, whereas most of the rest of the fish are right in the mid-water range to the upper water range. So let's talk about some things that I would like to change or add to the system. Number 1, I find that the system's actually losing water faster than I'd like through evaporation, especially now that we're starting to get into the colder months. The air's a little bit drier, and the tank is just absolutely evaporating at a rate that I don't really want to deal with. I'm basically having to fill the sump back up so that it keeps operating, doesn't blow bubbles, every 3 days, 4 days tops. And that's a little excessive because that's basically twice a week, and I don't want to have to go under the stand, hook up a Python, fill the sump, and do all that twice a week. So what I'm thinking I might do, I have enough room in the stand, I might get a 20-gallon aquarium, put that in the stand, fill that with water, and hook up a nice auto top-off, like the high door auto top-off, for instance, the smart level controller. That basically will, when the water level gets low in the sump, the sensor reads that. It then takes that 20-gallon aquarium water and fills the sump back up with that. I would predict that that 20-gallon aquarium would probably last me the better part of 2 to 3 weeks in terms of evaporation, maybe even a little bit longer. And that would really solve that problem, especially in the winter. And then in the summer, it'd be nothing because the tank didn't evaporate nearly as much. So that would probably last a solid month or, 5 weeks. It's just sounds glorious to me. Can't think of a reason not to do it. Another thing I would have liked to have changed is some of the driftwood placement. The nice giant pile of driftwood I have on the left side of the tank actually comes very close to the glass. And it's making it difficult in a couple of spots to actually use my algae scraper and actually clear that glass of the little bit of surface algae that gets around there. So you can kind of see right around that branch that it's just a little dirty. And I don't like smacking into the branch, even though it will move out of the way a bit, just because then the whole structure shakes inside the tank and the fish don't like it. So I kind of just let the algae grow there. But I should, just take a pair of clips and nip the tip of the wood off there, and that would really solve the problem. So I probably will do that as well. One of the additions I've already made is I added a pair of Eheim automatic feeders to help give the fish more food during the day. I found that sometimes when things got a little bit hectic with the kids, that I wasn't feeding the fish as much as I should have been. So the Eheim feeders are now doing a little bit of that for me. I've got both flake food and pellets on those 2 feeders, and they're adding extra food to the tank. So I still feed by hand at least once a day, plus I've got the added food going in, and now the smaller, more active fish like the giant danios, funny, smaller active, but they're called giant, they're looking a lot better, a lot fatter, happier, healthier. So that's a big plus for me. And just in general, everybody's gaining a little bit of size faster than they were previously, which I can appreciate because many of these fish get much bigger than they currently are. Anytime you set up an aquarium and you get things going and you think you know exactly what you want and you get it all in there, you end up second guessing it later. So of course, now that I've got the community of mostly South American fish in there, doing their thing, looking good, I'm sitting here thinking, what if I did a tank full of Ultim Angels and planted it? Or what if I did a, you know, temperate kind of saltwater system that had no coral or anything, just big fish, and they were swimming around? Of course, I've got all these ideas now that are different from what I've done, but that's the fun of it. You know, maybe soon I'll change it up and do something else and find new homes for those nice, happy, healthy fish that I've got in there now and try something a little bit different, something I haven't done before. So many options. I'm also really happy with the performance of the aquarium surviving 2 power outages. So I had 2 short power outages. One was probably upwards of an hour or so. The other one was only about 10 minutes. And in both those situations, the tank drained right to the overflows, which I expected. The sump was able to hold all that water, and as soon as the power came back on, it pushed all the water back up to the system. There were no issues with the system burping. Everything performed perfectly. So it was really nice to know that the plans and steps I'd taken to make sure that in an emergency situation, the tank would be able to handle that, it performed well, and it took a huge weight off my chest, especially since for one of those power outages, I wasn't home, and I had to get everything secondhand via text, which is always a little unnerving, but it survived. Speaking of scary situations you don't expect, my redundancy actually paid off big time. For probably what was a few days, I'm not absolutely positive as to the time, but for a few days, my water level in the aquarium looked a little bit low, and I couldn't figure out what was really going on. There's so much water movement in the tank from the pumps and from that FX6 filter that I can't really tell whether or not the overflow system is working other than the height of the water in the aquarium. But because I'm usually sitting on the floor and the canopy hides the water line pretty well, I couldn't figure out why something wasn't just quite right. And then a few days later, I realized looking in the stand that the power brick I had mounted inside the stand with some double-sided Velcro tape had fallen off. It happened to be the one that hooks to the return pump, and it happened to unplug itself when it fell. So for several days, my sump system was not running at all, which means had I not had that backup FX6 canister, my tank would have had 0 filtration. Luckily, it still had circulation from the internal pumps, but it was really helpful to have that FX6 there because in that just random happenstance event, I still had filtration and my tank survived no problem. Because redundancy. People were like, why are you doing that? Why are you going to put it? It's because sometimes things happen that you're not prepared for, unless you prepare for them like I did. So all in all, I'm very happy with this system. A year later, it's still performing really well, and I'm really just enjoying how simple it is to care for that tank. Although I am really starting to think about changing the livestock to something else. Not that I don't love my fish, but the possibilities. Speaking of which, why don't you let me know what you think I should do if I do change something by dropping me a comment down in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe, because how are you going to know what I do if you don't subscribe, right? And you should keep on tanking for at least a year before you change your mind and decide to change everything. At least a year. Maybe longer. Maybe not. What should I say about the aquarium? I don't know.